All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are joining us from in the world today. My name is Molly Hale. I am the Global Head of Customer Success here at Ardoc, and I am happy to be your facilitator for this session. Welcome to our third day of EA Jumpstart 25 Customer Showcase Edition. Yesterday, we heard from Fred from Jack in the Box about their tremendous application rationalization. And tomorrow and Friday, we have a fantastic lineup for you all with speakers from the Swedish insurers Folksam, as well as the Victoria State Government. And now, welcome to day 3 of our customer showcase with the manufacturing giant Tenneco. Before we move into the main event, a few housekeeping points to cover. This session is being recorded, and you will be sent a copy of the recording afterwards. You'll notice a resources section in the event console, and you'll find supporting documents that relate to the content and we will be covering. Here's our brief agenda. First, I'll introduce you to our guest speaker from Tenneco, and then pass over to our host for what promises to be a very insightful session. We've allowed time at the end for your questions to afford an even deeper insight into Tenneco's EA journey. You'll see the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, so please submit your questions and we'll do our best to get to them all. So, without further ado, it's time to meet our experts. A big welcome to A.B. Cletus from Tenneco, a seasoned enterprise architect with over 20 years of experience across manufacturing giants, including Boeing, Johnson Controls, and Adient. He now drives technology, strategy, governance, and automation at Tenneco, as well as Dr. Andreas Frängu, joins us again as host in his capacity of a freelance enterprise architecture, leadership, and technology consultant. Andreas previously served as a senior director on the Gartner EA research team and has held business and IT architecture roles as renowned companies such as M&G, Shell, and DHL. Welcome to you both. But before I pass over to you, Andreas, AB, I wonder if you could give us a brief overview of Tenneco for anyone who isn't familiar with the world of manufacturing.
Sure. So Tenneco, we are one of the world's leading designer manufacturer for OEM customers, original equipment manufacturer, kind of like a tier 1 supplier. Revenue for 14 billion. We've got plants all around the globe, around 250 plants, 63,000 employees. Our group, which is the Enterprise Architecture and Innovation Group, has 10 EA practitioners, and we cover a broad spectrum of technologies, right from cloud, data, and a whole bunch of other technologies, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is process, strategy, and governance. But that's Tenneco in a nutshell for you.
All right. Thank you, AB. Appreciated. And with that, over to Andreas to kick us off with the state of the EA nation, based on his many years working in enterprise architecture and technology.
Thanks, Molly, for that introduction. Let's explore the related use case of application and platform modernization and what opportunities and challenges EA teams can face when supporting this. Whether you're replacing like for like, upgrading or enhancing applications and platforms, capability mapping and analysis are still the best approaches for understanding the opportunities and impacts for change and how these help drive decision making. When you upgrade or modernize, you are likely to inherit embedded AI. The type of AI being used is not always transparent to yourselves and your company. So it's important to understand the nature of the technology being used and its opportunities, security, and risk profiles. When you leverage AI capability, these will provide productivity and efficiency gains. So it's important to understand what the AI use cases are and what parts of the business are supported through using AI and what the cost and benefits are of using them. Large-scale modernization is very complex. Successful transformation requires effective transition roadmaps and planning to align initiatives, stakeholders, partners, and also to secure funding. Your funding will also need to account for parallel running of applications and platforms, sometimes for multiple years. And lastly, changes in the platform landscape will inevitably result in operating model transformation. This could impact processes, governance, supporting tools, and roles. I hope that helps the listeners with context to help them with their own practices. And now over to our practicing EA expert, AB.
Andreas,
Hi, welcome. How you doing?
pretty good. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Should we get stuck in? So let's start with vision. So you have a multi-year EA roadmap. Can you talk us through the stages or solutions that aim to hit within that time frame, please?
Absolutely, Andreas. So, so when Tim, my manager who heads our EA and innovation group, founded the EA practice 2 years ago, we had the responsibility of not just kind of building a completely new vertical, right? It's also building that understanding of how EA as a new practice can contribute to the overall technology maturity at Tenneco. So he brought me in as the head of strategy and governance function of EA, and we kind of knew that in order for this to be successful, we need to have a couple of key ingredients in place. One is, as you all know, good process, right? I mean, it's only as effective as a good process. So that was one. The other was having a platform that can kind of transparently abstract out the master data and all of the sources of truth that helps us make a good EA decision. So in order for both of these to really align well, there's a need for that tool, that platform that'll act as a glue and bring it all together. So just to kind of deep dive on that just a little bit, you must have heard this before, that the notion of being an EA practitioner is all about the TAGAFE, right? I mean, truckloads of architecture document, following ADM, building all of that architectural artifact. I forget what they're called. Like I think it's like business, application, data, and technical, right? But it really isn't that anymore, right? It can be prescriptive, right? EA today is not prescriptive. It's at least in this day and age with the technology changes that we are seeing, and like you said, right, all the AI automation that we are seeing, some of these mundane tasks eventually end up getting automated, right? So I can talk more about how we build out that practice and our roadmap, but I must start off by saying that we couldn't go to the business partners and say that, hey, pause, give us a year to set things up, and then we can start innovating and addressing a pain. But that just isn't done, right? Not in our industry. We had to figure out a way to support business and kind of build a process that is not just effective, but also not bureaucratic, right? So I had the task of building the governance side of EA. I understand that that challenge is kind of like a double-edged sword, um, kind of like an anti-pattern that most EA practitioners go through, right? So this might not be really something new for a seasoned EA practitioner. I kind of like to call that design pattern or anti-pattern, the bottleneck of initiatives. So if the EA practice that we build is centered around document building and building a bunch of checklists and all of this, does it really add value? Is that really EA design, or is it mostly solution design or just an IT audit function, right? So the goal for our EA team was how do we add value, right? What is the processes that we have to set that we can add that value? And so when we decide to build and stabilize the EA process, we did it in 4 different buckets. We call it maturity level, and each maturity level was spanning over 6 months, a sprint, if you may call it so, a sprint that's 6 months long. I know that's still a sprint, but 6 month long maturity levels, right? And the first 6 months, excuse me, we spent a lot of time focusing on the whole intake, solution design, enterprise design, and then validating against the architecture review board and the approval. So that 6 months was focused on building the intake, finding the different functions that will be part of the intake, building out strategy, roadmap, and direction for each one of the different domain areas. Um, and I'm going to say that with modern EA, there's a lot of EA tools that has the ability to do this out of the box, right? And be it the ServiceNow has out of the box capability for change management. Similarly, all of the new EA tools has capabilities to build an intake process that will help EA teams kind of structure that out. So that was the first maturity level. I'll quickly breeze through the other three. We are in year 2 of setting up our EA practice. The second level of maturity that we went through last year was how do we take that work that we spend on setting up a process and, as counterintuitive as this might be, make it invisible, right? So that the focus was on solving the business problem. And if that involves adopting new technologies, then how do you gradually wean that in? The process is the platform, and the value add is the true solutioning. We didn't want people to be bogged down by the process itself, but focus on value addition on top of the EA intake process. So that was the second, and we are right now in the third level of maturity, our third sprint, since I use the term sprint, where the focus is on making sure that every request that we solution, be it building a strategy for a space as diverse as engineering to HR to procurement and so on, all of that builds organically data into our platform, in this case, RDoc, and helps us to validate if that's the right path. And that kind of also laid the foundation of our core theme for the third level of maturity, which is master data and integration maturity. How do we build master data for each one of the different areas in our application portfolio? Be it data for all the technology components, be it data for business components like HR and so on and so forth. And then integrating with a whole bunch of other systems so that there is a cross-pollination of all of that data elements, and that would make it easier for building out strategy and roadmaps and so on. This kind of blurs with our next final level of maturity. At least we planned for 2 years initially, and we've got plans that goes beyond that. But this kind of blurs with our fourth level of maturity, which kind of focuses on how do we innovate and strategize fast. So do we have the data to take quick decisions? And what does that look like, right? So overall, I mean, since you asked me in terms of, what was our roadmap, this is at a high level what we achieved last year and the roadmap that we had for this year and going forward. Hopefully that answers your question, Andreas.
It does, AB. Can I just ask a follow-up question? So you talked about we don't want this to be a paper-based exercise again, right? So sounds what you've done. You've created a lot of kind of efficiencies in decision making. But has anyone in your kind of stakeholder group noticed that actually your EA practice is actually doing things in a faster, more agile way? Have they noticed that? Have you got any feedback from them?
A lot, right? I mean, the usage of tools has really made a big difference. So you just talk in terms of speed of EA practitioners implementing their strategy, right? Is that the focus of the question?
Yes, yeah. So decision makers, it's all about coming up with recommendations, designs, and then getting people to agree them, right? So you can move them forward. Exactly that. Yeah.
Yeah,
How can you execute? Yeah.
for sure, in a big way, right? I mean, um, going back to what I said earlier, right? Having that data in your fingertips would help you make that strategic decisions fast. One thing that I commonly tell people in our group is the whole whiteboard philosophy, where in a strategy meeting, you spend the first 20 minutes whiteboarding what all data points we have today, right? But with having tools like RDoc and having a mature data platform that has all of your application portfolio in a single location, that helps us move fast with such kind of assessments.
Great stuff. Thank you. Let's move on to our kind of next question and topic. So you're envisaging RDoc as a kind of key platform for the EA practice. Tell us a bit more about what does that mean and what does it mean for you? And also in implementing RDoc, what was your kind of goals that you were trying to focus on, and how did it all fit into the kind of broader IT strategy?
Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to sound like I'm preaching, but EA today and many EA practitioners, they use this thing called modern EA, right? And the traditional EA that, and you kind of alluded to this towards the start of the conversation, right? The traditional EA is kind of very descriptive and focused on current state modeling. What that leads to is inflexible documentation, standard rigid design guidelines. There isn't that touch of reality where we link EA to, I'm going to use the word strategic quite a bit, but strategic and more importantly, operational side of the house, right? So if you want to call it like operational EA and strategic EA, that wasn't a big focus area, at least when I started off being a part of the EA practice. And that has to change, and I've seen that has changed in what we've seen over the last 5 or more years, right? The focus now has with the pace of technology, there has been a change of focus, right? It's no longer that traditional UML modeler and Archinate kind of tooling based approach, where it's tough to be adaptable. That adaptiveness is limited. Modern EA is really focused on, hey, how do I visualize the enterprise and give you that aha moment, right? That's one side. And on the other side, we've got all of these strategic modeling tools, right? And for us, and I'm not a paid actor, but for us, RDoc was the latter. It was that strategic modeling tool, and I'm going to use some of the RDoc terminology here, but that degree of relationship model was that it helps us to relate with those degrees of references, things that wasn't really evident when you first took a look at the two applications, disparate applications, but operating in the same business domain. That helped us to infer and kind of derive inferences. And I think it has a lot to do with the way it's designed underlying. It's the whole graph database model. And I don't want to go into the technical details of the implementation, but from what I understand from the product team, that kind of made a difference and helped us glean those insights. Now, if you ask me, right, to take that question from you a step further, right? I mean, why is that important, right? I mean, how does RDoc help us with that, right? I can talk about traditional use cases like, I have a application in a plant, and how do I expand it to another plant in the same business group or a different business group and find relationships? This is like a potential use case of using that whole graph-based model to find that lineage and linkage between all of these apps. But that's a traditional approach. And you could have also done that with Excel sheets, trying to list out all the applications and find relationship and so on and so forth. But what about modern use cases, right? And a good example, since you bought AI, is innovation in general, right? And this might be my biased way of saying this, but is it better to fail fast? I forget the saying, fail fast, learn fast, and improve fast, as opposed to getting it right the first time? Do you wait for that perfect design, or just allow it to be the wild, wild west, innovate fast, and then rein it in? So there are two approaches, right? And having a collaboration platform like RDoc can help you build that out. I mean, I can give you an example, and I'm not sure if everyone can relate to this. This is mostly manufacturing. take the example of robotics, right? In our area, there's a lot of innovation in that space. Power management, production of hardware dimensions, improved ability to connect both Wi-Fi and everything else, and then the way to process data. We could have got our team involved, spend a year learning the landscape, assessing the solution, and then coming up with a standard and proposing the right solution. Time to market, right? There's a huge time element there. The other way to do it is to crowdsource it. I mean, we've got engineers across manufacturing engineers across the globe that have done this for years. Why not crowdsource it and build that knowledge, not have a standard? Once we have that lot of solutions in our kitty, this is where we would bring it all together, rationalize and standardize our processes for robotics. Granted, you can still do this with SurveyMonkey and Excel sheets and all of that, but I think a platform like RDoc or anything that's very EA focused and collaboration focused would help you build that new reference architecture and standard quickly. I know this is really long winded, but to summarize, as I said earlier, right, that fourth level of maturity is to give the organization an ability to quickly implement strategy. And I can give you so many use cases like what I talked in terms of innovation in robotics. But with the tooling that we got with RDoc and its tooling for strategy to execution, this is kind of like being our perfect digital twin in our strategy execution. Did I kind of cover what you're looking for, Andres? Is that in line with what
You
you're looking
did. Excellent. I mean, I'd like to kind of just kind of ask you a kind of an adjacent kind of quick question around it, right? So you've got RDoc as this kind of central platform that's a hub, right? That's bringing all that information, the data together. How did you navigate the kind of integration with other tools that other people were using, right, to make sure that everyone's aligned, right, and we're getting a kind of single view of the truth across the kind of landscape?
Oh, great question. I mean, um, if you remember earlier, I talked about master data, right? And it is so important that you do not operate in a silo and you've got point of connection. I'm going to say cross pollinate between different sources of truth. We've got in our landscape, we've got ServiceNow, which has a lot of data on hardware, software, and CMDB and all of that. We've got all of our cloud platforms on the other sides bringing in data in terms of what all we've implemented on the cloud. And then we've got IT OT systems, right? Operation technology and IT systems that is bringing data. How do we bring it all together? And that's an awesome question because if we do not bring it all together, then we don't have the right master data to operate and provide all of that solutions. And we do this through an intricate set of integrations and pulling data in from different platforms, either natively using RDoc's integration capabilities, or we also have a layer sitting on top of RDoc, which uses things like Azure Logic App to bring all of these data and consolidate and use AI techniques to make sure that it's easily available for the EA practitioner, not just the EA practitioner. It's also for the business partners that are using our platform and trying to discover data points for their assessment.
Thanks, Abe. That's great. That's a great response and follow up to that. Let's move on to our next question and last question. Gamification. So it's interesting that you're using this approach, especially, I believe, for data collection. What inspired you to use this method, and how has it impacted the engagement, right, around data and data quality?
Cool. Great question. So it wasn't really just about data collection. Data collection was a big part of it, but it was much more than that. So a typical design pattern, and I know I keep using the word design pattern often. I think I'm sure you also do it. It's an EA practitioner's way of standardizing their problem solving techniques, right? And I think one design pattern that I keep telling our team is you need to quantify maturity. be it business capability modeling or technology innovation. Um, Technology innovation in areas like cloud, robotics, since we talked about robotics earlier, engineering, or any of those other spaces, right? The list goes on. And I am sure most EA practitioners, strategy consultants would have done that for a really long time with my pet peeve, Excel sheets. They would have bought an Excel sheet, devised their own mathematical formula to define the score, whether this is application rationalization or identifying gaps. So they would have done that whole assessment and that cost model, or sorry, the mathematical formula in an Excel sheet. Now with our doc, this is really easy to build out. We implemented a scoring methodology that combined APQC, which is like an industry standard for business process mapping, and use that along with RDoc's capability to map all the applications and derive scores, right? So what we did is we calculated a score against each plan, and then used RDoc. I'm going to the weeds a little bit here, but use RDoc's Discover dependency map to show a global view of all the plans, its parent business groups, and at an org level, that holistic view. So this gave us a couple of quick wins. For one, good or bad, it allows us to compare and contrast plans within a BU, right? You've got a scoring saying that, okay, your plan is scored at this because you've implemented these many APQCs, and these are the applications that you have in that APQC, in that business process. But more importantly, not apart from just comparing, it also gave the ability for them, the plan managers and users, to realize that, hey, I mean, I've got the same application or same technology, sorry, business landscape as the other plan. Why not implement that disparity between both of us plans? So that disparity kind of help the plan teams to identify these are the areas that I should adopt newer technologies because my peer in the same business group has done this. So that's another area. And finally, this crowdsourcing of this capability maturity data collection with gamification has helped build this data. Again, I mean, this is still work in progress. We are rolling this out to some of our business teams, but the adoption has been really good so far.
Thanks. Can we ask you a question about the decision making that you folded into this? Because obviously you could be looking at a range of different use cases, and eventually someone's got to make a decision, right, on the outcome. So how did you do that, and who got involved?
So even though it's going to be a collaborative effort, right? There are multiple stakeholders to this. So when we build the platform and we made it available to everyone, we didn't want it to be just a platform for us EA practitioners. I mean, we could have done that in a Word document or a presentation. We wanted to be a collaborative platform. So that decision making that you were talking about in our world, it was a collaboration between us EA solution architects, the architecture review board, and much more. So it involved getting them all together, looking at the data that was collected within the platform, and making sure that it provided the right kind of insights. Was your question more on who all were involved in decision making, or what kind of outcomes you're looking for, Andreas?
It was, and also in terms of the gamification approach, because obviously
Oh, okay.
you're scoring, right, a
Okay.
lot of different ideas, right,
Yeah.
and someone eventually has to also make a decision. What do we invest in, right, for example, and move that forward?
Yeah.
How did
Yeah. I
you
know.
do that?
So this scoring, no, I think I must have not addressed your question earlier, but this scoring helped us identify um, potential areas of improvement, right? So it really depends on the stakeholder that was viewing this data. So now that we've collected this data, for a business stakeholder, it's identifying gaps that he has in his process. For an enterprise like us, it's identifying areas that we've not provided a holistic solution. For people in between, like the IT business partners, it's what have we do to what are the missing areas that we have to do the future state planning. So for different stakeholders, it provided a different perspective, a lens to evaluate that data from.
Thanks, AB. That's great. That's the end of our questions. Thanks a lot, AB, for your insights.
You're welcome, Andreas.
All right. Thank you, Andreas. Thank you, AB. That gave us great context on the state of the EA nation, along with fantastic insight into Tenneco's EA journey and success. Now it's time for audience questions. We got a few pre-submitted questions, but feel free to keep dropping yours into the chat. We'll do our best to get through all of them. However, those we don't get to, we will reach out after the session. Andreas, what questions do we have for AB?
Thanks, Molly. We've got some really great questions here. Let's start with the first one. It's about measuring performance. So, AB, how did you go about measuring your performance as an EA practice, and then also demonstrating the value from the services you provide to stakeholders?
Sure. So that there are many metrics that we could use, right? From the traditional ones, like as a result of implementing a solution, what are the cost savings that you've seen, be it rationalization or improving the process optimization, to the other end of the spectrum, which is focused on, let's say, capability maturity, right? So there's a lot of different ways in which you could measure the service that we provided, but I guess one of my favorites, now that I think of it, is I'm going to throw an acronym out. It's called RCCBM. You reuse, config, customize, buy, and then only make. So what we've done is, for all the requests that have come in, we build this graph out saying that, okay, out of these requests, we were able to fulfill a reuse in X number of percentage of requests. I mean, there was a huge component where we did configurations to either expand that solution to more locations or customize to handle the regional dependencies for that application. And then we had, okay, if we can do all this, it's not necessarily that we did something bad, but we go out to the market and buy a solution. And if we couldn't buy, and there wasn't something that's filling that business need, this is where maybe, this is our industry advantage and competitive advantage, and we have to make something from ground up, right? So that's the make. And this sequence might not be applicable for all industries. It really depends on the industry you're from. I mean, if you are operating in a space which is very focused on IP and software IP, right? In our industry, we're not in the business of making software, but there might be an industry where the focus is on making software. So for them, maybe the make is a higher return of investment as opposed to buying something. So a big measure, going back to your question, I know it's long-winded, but going back to your question, a big measure that we publish every month is what is our RCCBM? I mean, how much do we reuse versus how much do we have to buy? And if we have to buy, how much of that is an overlap with existing solutions that we have, and it's not a good buy because it overlaps with what we have today, as opposed to how much of the buy is fulfilling a business capability, business process for which we've got no solution and lower order of maturity. So those are some of the typical measures that we have as a EA practice. I mean, there are many more, but these are some of the top ones that we use to measure our team's performance.
Thanks, Abby. So do you agree these with your line management or key stakeholders? Do you do this every year, or are these kind of set kind of metrics, right, that roll over every year, or do you have to kind of renegotiate these every year, right, with your stakeholders?
So we're not at a level where we've done this for a really long time to understand if we have to realign. I'm sure we will reach a stage where we will have to benchmark this and say, you know what, maybe we have to realign these metrics. Right now, we are like maybe 5 or 6 months into publishing this every other week, to our different stakeholders. But I'm sure the more we start publishing this and the more we measure our progress as EA, there is going to be some kind of rehashing of what these metrics would look like and what this means for our business. Because at the end of the day, it's how can we make life of our business stakeholders easier? How can they achieve their goals quicker? So there should be some kind of realignment coming in pretty soon.
Great, great, AB. Let's talk about kind of your stakeholders, right? Your broader stakeholder group, and if we kind of think about your own outside of your own CIO sponsorship, who would you say were your strongest allies within the organization, and how they helped you to be successful in your endeavors?
It's going to be a mix of our business partners and the folks that are talk to business and indirectly our business stakeholders. That group, I mean, if when they see the improvement in the time to market with how we solution the requests that are coming in and all the strategic initiatives, and when they look at the progress that we've shown over the last 2 years, I mean, the progress because of all of the data that's getting built into the platform that can be reused, they have been our biggest crusaders. I mean, they've been very supportive. They've been promoting our practice, saying that, okay, you know what, they didn't fill up a couple of documents and send it back our way. They provided value. They provided recommendations saying that, okay, this is what needs to be done as opposed to the way you're doing it today. So they have our business stakeholders and our business partners have been our biggest supporters in this moment so far over the last 2 years.
Thanks, AB. How far have you got into the business kind of stakeholder group, right? How much of the work that you do, and particularly using RDoc, do you think benefits the business stakeholders?
Not as far as we wanted to, right? We use some metrics to measure how much of Discover access there is today, and I'm not going to go over numbers, but it's not to the level of collaboration that we wanted to. But that's okay. I see this as getting more maturity and also improving our collaboration space. So as we go along the journey and build better data within our EA platform, I'm sure people are going to log in and use it for whiteboarding and strategy planning. And as the usage goes up, it's going to snowball, and there's going to be better collaboration within the EA space. So is it enough today? No, it isn't. But we're just 1 year down the journey, and I'm hoping that things will change in the coming months and years, if you may call it so.
That's great, Amy. I think we talked about how RDoc kind of sits in the kind of IT landscape, right? In terms of the data it describes the IT landscape. So I'm assuming you must have faced some barriers, right, initially when you kind of sold the idea about doing this. What was the biggest barrier? Was it getting access to data? Was it getting people to agree what the data is, or actually people to play ball with yourselves?
Um, from the get-go, there's been a lot of support in what we were doing. I think the biggest barrier was the documentation barrier. The questions asked was, okay, is this going to be bureaucratic? Do I have to fill more documentation to achieve the results that we're looking for? So that fear of bureaucracy is something that we had to fight with. And if you remember when I talked about that 4 level of maturity, the second level of maturity was really focused on defeating that barrier of the fear of bureaucracy. How do we make a process so invisible, for want of a better word, so that the documentation is built into the system, and if they document it, there is true value realization out of that documentation. So that was a big barrier, and I think to a certain extent we have gotten over that with building documents that are living and not a one use and throw. And there's a lot of native RDoc constructs like doc presentations and so on that have actually helped us in that process.
Thanks, AB. Final question. If you did this all over again, what would you do differently and why?
um, I, I I don't think I would have done this different. I've built EA practice before in other softwares, right from the traditional approach, like I said, right, using traditional UML tools. This is like 10, 15 years ago to the modern approach, what we've done with RDoc. Would I have done things differently? Um, I don't think so. One regret that I have is that 6 months that we spend on building that intake process. um, I'm hoping that as tools mature, they will be out of the box capabilities that would help us build that intake into VA and talk to systems like ServiceNow and other demand management processes and feed that directly without us having to build that out. But I don't think I would have done a lot of things differently other than look for ways to engage with the customers sooner.
Great, AB. Thanks a lot for answering those questions. Over to Molly.
Yeah, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you, AB, for sharing your expertise. Thank you, Andreas. And thanks to all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or reach out at hello@ardoc.com. See you at our next Jumpstart session tomorrow, where we have Folksam, a century-old Swedish financial insurance giant, joining us to talk about compliance. Until next time, have a great rest of your days, and goodbye for now.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks. Bye-bye.